I was 6 years old when they shoved me out of the Christmas photo. My name is Harmony, and that moment, standing there in my scratchy red dress while my cousin Remington smirked and my Aunt Lisa adjusted the camera, that's when I learned what it meant to be unwanted. "Move over, Harmony," Remington had said, her voice dripping with the kind of authority only an 8-year-old golden child could possess. "You're blocking the tree." I wasn't blocking anything. I was standing exactly where Aunt Lisa had positioned me 30 seconds earlier. But Remington's manicured little hand pressed against my shoulder, and I stumbled sideways, nearly tripping over the Persian rug that cost more than most people's cars. "Remington, sweetie, perfect," Aunt Lisa cooed from behind the camera. "Now smile for Mommy." I stood there in the shadows, watching them pose. Uncle Ernest in his expensive sweater, Aunt Lisa with her perfectly styled hair, and Remington, always Remington, front and centre like she owned the world, which in that house she basically did. "Can I get back in the picture now?" I asked, my 6-year-old voice barely above a whisper. Aunt Lisa's smile faltered for exactly 1 second. "Oh, Harmony, we're just taking a few family photos first." Family photos. The words hit me like ice water. "But I'm family too," I said louder this time. "Right?" The silence stretched so long I could hear the grandfather clock ticking in the hallway. Uncle Ernest shifted uncomfortably. Remington examined her fingernails like they held the secrets of the universe. Finally, Aunt Lisa set down the camera. "Harmony, dear, you're very lucky we took you in after what happened to your parents. But you need to understand your place here, my place." At 6 years old, I didn't fully grasp what she meant, but I felt it in my bones, that cold, hollow feeling that would follow me for the next 12 years. "Now, run along and play," Aunt Lisa continued, already turning back to her precious camera. "We'll call you when dinner's ready." I didn't run along. I stood there for another minute, watching them arrange themselves again, watching Remington claim the spot where I'd been standing, watching Uncle Ernest avoid my eyes. That night at dinner, I sat at the far end of the massive dining table while they discussed Remington's riding lessons and her acceptance into some exclusive private school. The staff, Maria the cook, James the groundskeeper, even Patricia who cleaned the bathrooms, they all looked at me with these pitying expressions when they thought no one was watching. "Harmony's so quiet tonight," Uncle Ernest observed, cutting into his prime rib. "She's always quiet," Remington said, not looking up from her plate. "It's weird." "She's processing," Aunt Lisa replied in that clinical tone she used when discussing me, like I was a problem to be solved rather than a child to be loved. "Trauma affects children differently. They talked about me like I wasn't sitting right there, like I was invisible." After dinner, I escaped to my room, the smallest bedroom on the 3rd floor, tucked away from the main family quarters like an afterthought. While organising my few belongings, I found something wedged behind my dresser drawer. An old photograph, yellowed at the edges. My parents. My real parents. I'd never seen this picture before. Mum was laughing, her dark hair catching sunlight. Dad had his arm around her waist, both of them looking so young and happy. On the back, in Dad's careful handwriting, someone had written a date, and below that, in different ink, words that made my blood run cold. "If anything happens to us, trust no one." I stared at those words until they blurred. Trust no one. Had my father known something would happen to them? Had he suspected? "Harmony!" Aunt Lisa's voice echoed up the stairs. "Lights out!" I shoved the photograph under my mattress and turned off the lamp. But I didn't sleep. I lay there in the darkness, thinking about Christmas photos and family dinners and the way everyone in this house looked at me like I was something they'd stepped in. Trust no one. Maybe my father had been smarter than I'd given him credit for. 12 years later, on my 18th birthday, I learned exactly how unwanted I really was. I was supposed to be celebrating. Instead, I was crouched at the top of the stairs, listening to Aunt Lisa destroy what was left of my world. "The group home has an opening next month," she was saying into her phone, her voice carrying that familiar cold efficiency. "Yes, I know she just turned 18, but we've done our duty. More than our duty, frankly." My stomach dropped to the floor. "College?" Aunt Lisa laughed, the sound sharp as broken glass. "Patricia, please, we're not made of money. Remington's tuition at Yale is already bleeding us dry." I pressed myself against the wall, hardly breathing. "Look, we took her in when no one else would. We fed her, clothed her, gave her a roof over her head for 12 years. That's more than most people would do for someone else's mistake." Someone else's mistake. That's what I was to her. "The paperwork's already started," Aunt Lisa continued. "She'll be out by the end of the month. Honestly, it'll be a relief. Remington's getting married next year, and we can't have complications at the wedding." Complications. I was a complication. I crept back to my room, my hands shaking as I pulled out the old duffel bag I'd found in the attic months ago. My entire life fit into one bag. Some clothes, a few books, the photograph of my parents, and the $43 I'd saved from my allowance. $43. That was my ticket to freedom. I waited until 3 in the morning, when the house was silent except for Uncle Ernest snoring down the hall. I wrote a note, short and simple. "Thank you for everything. I'll be fine on my own." I left it on my pillow and walked out the front door for the last time. The night air was freezing, but I didn't look back. I ended up at the Grand View Hotel downtown, a fancy place where rich people stayed when they visited the city. The night manager, a tired-looking woman named Carol, found me shivering in the lobby at 4 a.m. "You running from something, honey?" she asked, not unkindly. "Running to something," I said, surprising myself with how steady my voice sounded. Carol studied me for a long moment. "You 18?" I nodded and showed her my ID. "We need a night janitor," she said finally. "Pays minimum wage, but you can sleep in the staff break room until you find a place. Interested?" "Yes," I said without hesitation. That's how I met Whitney. She was working the night shift too, cleaning the executive suites on the top floors. Whitney was my age, but had been on her own since 16. She had this way of making everything seem possible, even when you were mopping floors at 5 in the morning. "The trick," Whitney told me on my 3rd night, "is to pay attention. Rich people throw away more opportunities than poor people ever see." She was right. I learned to listen while I worked. I heard business deals discussed over late-night room service. I saw contracts left on desks, stock tips scribbled on hotel stationery, real estate listings scattered across coffee tables. 3 months into the job, I was cleaning the penthouse suite when I overheard a conversation that changed everything. Bought it for $850, put maybe 50 grand into it, flipped it for 1.2, a man in an expensive suit was bragging to his companion. 300,000 profit in 4 months. These old mansions are gold mines if you know what you're doing. I stopped mopping and pretended to organize the magazines on the coffee table. "The secret is buying in the right neighborhoods," he continued. "Places with history, character. Rich people eat that stuff up. They'll pay premium for a story." After they left, I found myself staring at the real estate section they'd left behind. Houses for sale, prices that seemed impossible, profit margins that made my head spin. "You look like you've seen a ghost," Whitney said, finding me there an hour later. "Whitney," I said slowly, "what do you know about flipping houses?" She laughed. "Nothing." "Why?" I folded the newspaper and tucked it into my cleaning cart. "Just curious." But it wasn't curiosity, it was something else entirely. Something that felt like hope mixed with hunger. That night I walked past the old estate where I'd grown up. The lights were on in every window, warm and golden. I could see Remington through the dining room window, probably planning her perfect wedding to her perfect life. I stood there in the cold, watching the family that had never wanted me, and made myself a promise. Someday I'd own something too, something they'd want, something they couldn't have. 5 years later, I was standing in my first property, a rundown Victorian that smelled like cat piss and broken dreams. "You sure about this?" Whitney asked, stepping carefully around a hole in the floorboard. "This place looks like a horror movie set." "It has good bones," I said, running my hand along the original crown moulding, "and it's in Riverside Heights. Give me 6 months." Whitney shook her head. "Harmony, you've been saving every penny for 3 years. If this goes wrong, it won't go wrong." But honestly, I had no idea what I was doing. I'd read every real estate book I could get my hands on, watched YouTube videos until my eyes bled, and sweet-talked contractors into teaching me the basics. My entire life savings, $12,000, was riding on this gamble. The first month was hell. I learned to tile by ruining an entire bathroom. I painted the same wall 4 times before getting the colour right. I ate ramen for breakfast, lunch and dinner because every dollar went into materials. But slowly the house transformed. The hardwood floors gleamed after I spent 2 weeks sanding and refinishing them myself. The kitchen went from avocado green nightmare to clean white modern. The master bedroom became something you'd see in a magazine. "Holy shit," Whitney breathed when she saw the finished product. "Harmony, this is incredible." I barely broke even on that first flip. After realtor fees, closing costs and materials, I walked away with $800 profit. $800 for 6 months of 16-hour days. But I'd proven something to myself. I could do this. The second house went better. The third one better still. By my 4th flip, I was making real money. That's when I met Curtis. He walked into the open house wearing a $1,000 suit and the kind of confidence that comes with knowing exactly what you're worth. "You did this yourself?" he asked, examining the custom built-ins I'd installed in the study. "Every nail," I said. "I'm Curtis. I'm a real estate attorney." He handed me his card. "And I think we should talk." Curtis became my business partner 6 months later. He handled the legal side, found properties before they hit the market, negotiated deals that saved me thousands. I handled everything else: the vision, the renovation, the transformation. "You have a gift," he told me after we flipped our 10th property together. "You see what places could be, not what they are." By 25, I owned my own company. By 28, I had a team of contractors who worked exclusively for me. By 30, I was flipping $1-million estates. But I never forgot where I came from. I kept tabs on my old family through public records, social media, the occasional Google search. Remington had married some guy named Dante and moved back into the family estate with their daughter. Aunt Lisa was still playing Queen of the Manor. Uncle Ernest had some kind of health issues. And their finances? Those were getting interesting. "You're obsessed," Curtis said one evening as I scrolled through property tax records on my laptop. "This isn't healthy." "I'm not obsessed. I'm thorough. Harmony, you've built an empire. You're worth more than most people dream of. Why do you keep looking backward?" I closed the laptop. "Because some debts take time to collect." Curtis didn't understand. He'd grown up loved, wanted, secure. He'd never been shoved out of a family photo or called a complication. He'd never had to choose between buying groceries or buying paint for a bathroom that might make or break your future. 2 weeks later, Curtis walked into my office with a folder and an expression I'd never seen before. "Sit down," he said. "What is it?" "The Elliott estate. It's going into foreclosure." My heart stopped. "What?" "Multiple missed payments, the bank's moving fast, auctions in 10 days. He slid the folder across my desk. "Harmony, this is it. This is your chance." I opened the folder with shaking hands. There it was, the property listing for the house where I'd grown up. The house where I'd been unwanted, unloved, pushed aside. The house that was about to be mine. "Can we get financing?" I asked. "Already arranged. Shell company, blind bid, completely anonymous. Curtis leaned back in his chair. But, Harmony, once you do this, there's no going back. You sure this is what you want? I stared at the photos of the estate, the grand staircase where I'd hidden and listened to Aunt Lisa plan my exile, the dining room where I'd sat alone at the far end of the table, the Christmas tree where Remington had shoved me out of frame. Set up the bid, I said. How much? I smiled for the first time in weeks. Whatever it takes. The auction was over in 12 minutes. Sold to bidder number 7, the auctioneer announced. Final bid, 1.8 million. Curtis squeezed my shoulder. Congratulations, you just bought your childhood home. I sat in the back of the courthouse watching other bidders file out. None of them knew they'd just witnessed the first move in a 15-year chess game. When do we tell them? Curtis asked. We don't. Not yet. I stood up, smoothing my black blazer. First, I want to see their faces when they realise they're about to lose everything. 3 days later, I pulled up to the estate in my Tesla, Curtis beside me with a briefcase full of legal documents. The house looked exactly the same, imposing, pristine, designed to intimidate. But this time I owned it. I rang the doorbell. Aunt Lisa answered, and for a split second I saw her struggle to place me. 15 years had changed me. The scared 18-year-old who'd fled in the middle of the night was gone. In her place stood a woman in designer heels and dark sunglasses, holding a leather portfolio. "May I help you?" Lisa asked, her voice carrying that familiar condescending tone. "Property management inspection," I said crisply. "I'm here on behalf of the new owner." Lisa's face went white. "New owner? But we haven't heard anything official." "You're hearing it now." I stepped past her into the foyer, Curtis following. "We need to conduct a full walkthrough, standard procedure." "This is highly irregular," Lisa sputtered. "We weren't given proper notice." "Remington!" a voice called from the living room. "Who's at the door?" My cousin appeared in the doorway, and I had to bite back a laugh. She looked tired, stressed, older than her 34 years. Marriage and motherhood hadn't been kind to the golden child. "These people claim to represent the new owner," Lisa said, wringing her hands. Remington looked me up and down, suspicion flickering in her eyes. "And you are?" "Miss Martin," I said smoothly. "Property management." Something shifted in Remington's expression. "Martin, that name sounds familiar." I ignored her and opened my portfolio, pulling out the official documents. According to the terms of sale, current occupants have 30 days to vacate the premises. 30 days? Lisa's voice cracked. "But we've lived here for 25 years. This is our family home." "Was your family home," I corrected. "Now it belongs to someone else." A man emerged from the kitchen, tall and handsome in that polished way that screamed expensive dental work. This had to be Dante, Remington's husband. "What's going on?" he asked, sliding an arm around Remington's waist. "They're evicting us," Remington said, her voice tight. "On what grounds?" Dante demanded. "We have rights as tenants." "You have rights as former owners who defaulted on your mortgage," Curtis interjected, his lawyer voice cutting through the room like a blade. "The bank foreclosed. The property was sold at auction. These are the facts." A young girl appeared at the top of the stairs, maybe 13, with Remington's blonde hair but sharper, more intelligent eyes. She sat on the top step, watching the drama unfold with obvious fascination. "Mom!" the girl called down. "What's happening?" "Go to your room, Emerson," Remington snapped. But Emerson didn't move. She kept staring at me with those perceptive eyes, like she was trying to solve a puzzle. I walked to the grand piano in the corner, the same piano where family photos had been displayed for decades, photos that never included me. I set my portfolio down on the polished surface and pulled out the deed. "This document transfers ownership effective immediately," I said, placing it next to a silver-framed photo of Remington's wedding. "You have 30 days to remove your personal belongings and vacate." "This is insane," Lisa said, her composure finally cracking. "Who is this new owner? We have a right to know." I removed my sunglasses and looked directly at her for the first time. "You're looking at her." The silence was deafening. Lisa's mouth opened and closed like a fish. Remington went pale. Dante took a step backward. "That's impossible," Remington whispered. You can't be—" "Hello, cousin," I said, my voice steady as steel. "Miss me?" From upstairs, Emerson let out a small gasp. "Oh my God," she breathed. "You're the girl from the old photos, the one they never talk about." "Emerson, go to your room now," Remington shouted. But I looked up at the girl and smiled. "Hello, Emerson. I'm Harmony. I used to live here too." "This is impossible," Lisa kept repeating. "You left with nothing. You were nobody. How could you possibly afford this?" I finished. Turns out being nobody motivated me to become somebody. I picked up the deed and handed it to Curtis. 30 days, Lisa. Use them wisely." I turned to leave, then paused at the door. "Oh, and Lisa, I'm moving in on the 1st. I hope you've kept my old room clean." 2 weeks later, I walked through my front door carrying a sledgehammer. "You're really going to demolish the conservatory?" Curtis asked, following me through the house with his tablet and measuring tape. "Every last piece of it." I hefted the hammer, testing its weight. "That's where Lisa used to host her charity luncheons, where she'd tell her friends how charitable she was for taking in her poor, orphaned niece. The conservatory had been Lisa's pride and joy, all glass and white wicker furniture, overlooking the rose garden. I'd never been allowed inside during her precious social gatherings. Now I was going to turn it into rubble. "Harmony, wait!" Curtis grabbed my arm as I raised the hammer. "Someone's coming up the drive." Through the glass walls, I saw Remington marching toward the house, her face twisted with fury. Behind her trailed Emerson, practically jogging to keep up. "This should be interesting," I said, setting down the hammer. Remington burst through the French doors without knocking. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" "Renovating my house," I said calmly. "Problem?" "You can't just destroy everything. This house has history, character." "It has your history," I corrected. "I'm making my own." Emerson slipped past her mother and walked straight up to me. "Are you really going to tear down the conservatory?" "Every piece." "Good," she said, surprising everyone. "Mum's charity friends are awful. They always talked about poor people like they were zoo animals." "Emerson!" Remington snapped. "So go wait in the car." "Actually, she can stay," I said. "This is educational." Remington's face went red. "You have no right." "I have every right. I own this house." I picked up the sledgehammer again. "Want to know what else I'm changing? The dining room's getting gutted. That massive table where you made me sit at the far end like some unwanted guest? Gone. The master bedroom where Lisa used to lock the door so I couldn't bother her. Complete renovation." "You're being vindictive," Remington said. "I'm being thorough." Curtis cleared his throat. "Harmony, maybe we should discuss the timeline." "No timeline. I want every room I was excluded from completely transformed." I turned back to Remington. "Remember Christmas morning when I was 10? You opened presents for 3 hours while I sat on the stairs, watching. This year, I'm putting up the biggest Christmas tree money can buy, right where you used to pose for all those family photos." Emerson was staring at me with wide eyes. "They made you sit on the stairs during Christmas." "Emerson, that's enough," Remington warned. "But that's horrible," the girl continued. "Why would they do that?" "Because I wasn't really family," I said simply. "Just a charity case they got stuck with." "That's not true," Remington protested, but her voice lacked conviction. "Isn't it?" I walked over to the built-in bookshelf and pulled out a photo album. "Let's take a trip down memory lane." I flipped it open to a random page. Family vacation to Martha's Vineyard. Lisa, Ernest, and Remington on a sailboat. All smiles and matching polo shirts. "Where am I in this picture, Remington?" She didn't answer. I flipped to another page. Remington's high school graduation. Another page. Easter dinner. Another page. Remington's college send-off party. Funny thing about family photos, I said. They tell you exactly who belongs and who doesn't. We fed you, clothed you, gave you a roof over your head, Remington said defensively. You gave me the smallest room on the 3rd floor and hand-me-downs from the staff's daughters. Don't confuse basic legal obligation with love. Curtis was rifling through papers at Uncle Ernest's old desk. Harmony, you need to see this. He held up a manila folder stuffed with documents, bank statements, legal papers, something that looked like a will. What is it? Your parents' estate documents. They were wealthy, Harmony, really wealthy. The room went dead silent. That's impossible, Remington said quickly. They died broke. That's why Harmony came to live with us. Curtis was scanning the papers, his lawyer brain processing information at lightning speed. According to this, your parents had substantial assets. Life insurance, property investments, a trust fund set up for Harmony's education. Where did the money go? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Curtis looked up at me, then at Remington, then back at the papers. The executor of the estate was Ernest, your uncle. So all the assets were liquidated shortly after your parents' death. The money was transferred to, he paused, checking another document, to accounts controlled by Ernest and Lisa. Remington went pale. That's not possible. It's all here in black and white, Curtis said grimly. They didn't just take you in out of charity, Harmony. They took you in after they stole your inheritance. I felt something cold settle in my chest. Not anger, something deeper, more dangerous. How much? I asked. Curtis did some quick calculations. With 15 years of compound interest, probably close to $3 million. Emerson looked between her mother and me. Mum, is that true? Remington was backing toward the door. I don't know anything about this. I was just a kid when... But you knew, I said quietly. All these years, you knew I wasn't the charity case. You knew I was the rightful heir, and you let them steal everything from me. Harmony, Get out of my house. That night I went hunting through the house like a woman possessed. Curtis had gone home hours ago, promising to dig deeper into the estate documents. But I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. I couldn't do anything except tear through every room, every closet, every forgotten corner where secrets might be hiding. I found what I was looking for in the attic. The trunk was shoved behind Christmas decorations and old furniture, covered in dust and cobwebs. It was locked, but I'd learned a thing or two about breaking into places over the years. A hairpin and some patience, and the old mechanism gave way. Inside, my mother's handwriting stared back at me. Letters, dozens of them, all addressed to Lisa. I pulled out the first one, dated just weeks after my parents' funeral. Lisa, I know you're grieving too, but Harmony needs stability right now. The trust fund Ernest is managing should cover all her expenses, education, clothes, everything. Please don't let her feel like a burden. She's lost everything. Love, Sarah. My hands were shaking as I read the next one. Lisa, I'm worried about Harmony's last phone call. She sounds so sad, so isolated. The trust fund has grown substantially. There's more than enough to give her everything she needs. Please make sure she knows she's loved. Sarah. Wait, these letters were all from my mother, but my mother had been dead for years when these were written. I checked the dates again. Then I looked at the signature more carefully. Not Sarah, Sarah, with no H. These weren't from my mother. These were from someone else named Sarah, someone who knew about the trust fund, someone who was checking on me. I dug deeper into the trunk and found a business card clipped to a stack of bank statements. Sarah Hendricks, private investigator. My blood turned to ice. At the very bottom of the trunk, I found a manila envelope marked confidential. Inside were photographs, surveillance reports, and a letter that made my world tilt sideways. Mr. and Mrs. Elliot. After 6 months of investigation, I have compelling evidence that your brother-in-law Ernest has been systematically embezzling from the Martin Trust Fund. The attached documentation shows unauthorized withdrawals totaling $847,000 over the past 3 years. More concerning are the suspicious circumstances surrounding Mr. and Mrs. Martin's death. I strongly recommend you contact the authorities immediately. S. Hendricks. The letter was dated 2 weeks before my 18th birthday. 2 weeks before I'd overheard Lisa planning to ship me off to a group home. I was still staring at the papers when I heard footsteps on the attic stairs. "Harmony," Emerson's voice called softly. "Are you up here?" "What are you doing here?" I asked, quickly shoving the papers back into the envelope. "It's past midnight." I snuck out. She climbed the rest of the way up, flashlight in hand. "Mum and Dad are fighting again. About you, about money, about everything. You shouldn't be here. Neither should you, technically. This used to be your house, right? Before they kicked you out?" I looked at this kid, really looked at her. She had Remington's features, but none of her cruelty. There was something honest about Emerson, something that reminded me of myself at that age. "Yeah," I said. "This used to be my house." "What's in the trunk?" "Family secrets," I said grimly. "The kind that destroy people." Emerson sat down cross-legged on the dusty floor. "Are you going to destroy us?" The question caught me off guard. "What do you mean?" "Mum's been crying for 3 days. Dad keeps making phone calls and yelling at people. Grandma Lisa won't come out of her room." She played with the hem of her pajama shirt. "They're scared of you." "Good. They should be. But what about me?" she asked quietly. "I never did anything to you. I wasn't even born when all the bad stuff happened." I studied her face in the dim attic light. "What do you want me to say, Emerson?" "I want you to tell me the truth. About what they did to you, about why you really came back." So I told her. Not everything, she was just a kid, but enough. About being pushed out of family photos, about sitting alone at dinner, about overhearing Lisa plan to abandon me the moment I turned 18. "That's horrible," Emerson whispered when I finished. "I'm sorry they did that to you." "It's not your fault, but it's not yours either." She stood up, brushing dust off her pajamas. "Harmony, when you destroy them, try to remember that some of us are innocent, okay?" After she left, I sat alone in the attic with my mother's trunk and a private investigator's report that suggested my parents might have been murdered. I pulled out my phone and called Curtis. "Do you know what time it is?" he answered groggily. "I found something," I said. "Something that changes everything." "What kind of something?" I stared at Sarah Hendricks' business card. "The kind that means this isn't just about stolen money anymore." "Harmony, what are you talking about?" "I think they killed my parents, Curtis, and I think I can prove it." The press conference was scheduled for 10 a.m. By 9:30, news vans lined the circular driveway like vultures. "You sure about this?" Curtis asked, adjusting his tie. "Once we go public, there's no taking it back." "I'm sure." I smoothed my black dress and checked my reflection in the hallway mirror. The same mirror where I'd practiced smiling as a child, hoping someone would notice me. "Is Sarah here?" "Just arrived. She's setting up the evidence boards in the living room." Sarah Hendricks looked exactly like I'd imagined. Sharp-eyed, no-nonsense, the kind of woman who'd spent decades uncovering other people's lies. She'd driven down from Portland the moment Curtis called her. 15 years I've been waiting for this day," she said, arranging photographs on an easel. "Your parents hired me 3 weeks before they died. They suspected Ernest was embezzling from your trust fund." "What happened to them?" I asked. "Car accident, brake failure on a mountain road." Sarah's expression was grim. "Except the brake lines had been cut. Clean slice, professional job. I tried to get the police to investigate, but Ernest had connections. The case was closed as accidental death. Through the window I saw more reporters arriving. Channel 7, Channel 12, the local newspaper. Curtis had promised them a story about financial fraud and possible murder. They'd come expecting small-town corruption. They were about to get so much more. "Places, everyone," Curtis announced. "Showtime." I walked into the living room where cameras and microphones waited. The same room where Lisa used to host her charity events, where she'd accepted praise for her generosity in taking me in. "Good morning," I began, my voice steady and clear. "My name is Harmony Martin. 15 years ago, I was forced to leave this house with nothing but the clothes on my back. Today, I'm here to expose the truth about why." I gestured to Sarah's evidence boards, bank records, photographs, police reports, the private investigator's findings. My parents, David and Jennifer Martin, died in 1994 when I was 6 years old. They left behind a substantial estate, over $2 million, held in trust for my education and care. My aunt and uncle, Lisa and Ernest Elliott, were named as my guardians and trustees. Camera flashes popped like fireworks. What they didn't tell anyone was that they'd been systematically stealing from that trust fund for years. By the time I turned 18, nearly $3 million had vanished into their personal accounts. A reporter raised her hand. "Do you have proof of these allegations?" Curtis stepped forward with a thick folder. "Bank records, forged documents, unauthorized withdrawals, it's all here. We're filing criminal charges this afternoon." "But that's not all," I continued. 3 weeks before their death, my parents hired private investigator Sarah Hendricks because they suspected the theft. They were planning to remove Ernest as trustee and press charges. Sarah took the microphone. "David and Jennifer Martin were murdered to prevent them from exposing the embezzlement. The brake lines on their car were deliberately cut. The room erupted in questions. Reporters shouted over each other, cameras swiveled, phones buzzed with breaking news alerts. "Where are the Elliots now?" someone called out. "Excellent question," I said. "Lisa Elliott is upstairs in what used to be my bedroom, refusing to come out. Ernest Elliott is in a memory care facility, suffering from dementia, conveniently unable to testify." "What about Remington Elliott?" I smiled coldly. "Remington knew, she's known for years, that I wasn't the charity case they pretended I was. She watched them spend my inheritance on her private schools, her wedding, her lifestyle. She's complicit in every crime committed in this house." The front door slammed open. Remington burst in, her hair dishevelled, her face streaked with tears. "Stop!" she screamed at the cameras. "Just stop! You don't understand." "I understand perfectly," I said calmly. "You lived off stolen money while I scrubbed hotel floors to survive." "We didn't know about the car," Remington sobbed. "I swear we didn't know Dad cut the brake lines." The room went dead silent. Every camera, every microphone, every reporter focused on Remington's breakdown. "You just confessed," Curtis said quietly, "on live television." Remington's face went white as she realized what she'd done. "I want immunity," she said desperately. "I'll tell you everything, but I want immunity." "Too late for that," Sarah said, "but keep talking. You're making our case for us." Through the chaos, I spotted Emerson standing in the doorway, watching her mother fall apart on live television. Our eyes met across the room. She mouthed 2 words, "I'm sorry." Then she turned and walked away. By noon, the story was trending nationally. By evening, Ernest had been arrested at the memory care facility. By the next morning, Lisa was in custody, and Remington was negotiating a plea deal. I stood in the empty house, watching the last news van drive away. Curtis found me in the conservatory, or what was left of it after my sledgehammer renovation. "How does it feel?" he asked. "Like winning," I said, "and like losing at the same time." The house felt different, empty. I walked through rooms that had once terrified me, my footsteps echoing off bare walls. The movers had taken the last of the furniture that morning. Tomorrow, the new owners, a young family with twin daughters, would move in and fill these spaces with laughter instead of secrets. "You sure about this?" Whitney asked, finding me in what used to be the master bedroom. "You could keep it, turn it into a rental property, make some income off it." "No." I ran my hand along the windowsill where I'd once pressed my face, watching Remington play in the garden below. "Some places need to be someone else's story." A soft knock echoed from downstairs. Whitney went to answer it while I took one last look around the room where Lisa had locked her door to keep me out, the room that was mine now, that I was choosing to give up. "Harmony," Whitney called. "You have a visitor." I found Emerson standing in the foyer, holding a manila envelope and looking older than her 13 years. "I brought you something," she said quietly. "Where's your mother?" "Jail. Dante's filing for divorce. I'm staying with my other grandparents now." She held out the envelope. "This was in Dad's safe. I thought you should have it." Inside were more letters, these ones in my father's handwriting. Real letters this time, not the investigator's correspondence. Letters he'd written to me but never sent, planning to give them to me when I was older. "My dearest Harmony," the first one began. "If you're reading this, something has happened to your mother and me. I want you to know that you were the greatest joy of our lives. You were never a burden, never unwanted, never anything less than completely loved." My hands shook as I read on. "I've set up a trust fund to ensure you'll never want for anything. Your Aunt Lisa has promised to love you like her own daughter. I pray she keeps that promise. But if she doesn't, if you ever feel alone or unloved, remember this. You come from a long line of survivors. You have strength in your bones and fire in your heart. Use both." "There are 12 letters," Emerson said softly. "One for each birthday until you turned 18. Dad found them in your parents' safe deposit box and never gave them to you." I looked up at this kid who'd lost everything too. Her family, her home, her sense of security. "Why are you giving these to me?" "Because they're yours. They were always yours." She paused. "And because I wanted to say I'm sorry for all of it. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I needed to say it. Emerson, I also wanted to thank you," she continued, "for telling the truth. Even though it destroyed my family, it was still the right thing to do." Whitney cleared her throat. "I'll be in the car," she said, giving us privacy. "What will you do now?" I asked Emerson. "I don't know. Finish school. Try to be better than they were." She looked around the empty foyer. "What about you? You got your revenge. You got justice. What comes next?" It was a good question. I'd spent 15 years planning this moment, and now that it was over, I felt strangely hollow. The anger that had driven me for so long was gone, replaced by something I couldn't quite name. "I'm starting a foundation," I said, surprising myself by saying it out loud, "for kids who age out of foster care, so they don't have to clean hotel bathrooms at 18 just to survive." Emerson smiled, the first genuine smile I'd seen from her. "That's perfect." After she left, I walked through the house one more time. In the kitchen, where I'd eaten countless silent dinners. In the living room, where I'd been excluded from family gatherings. In the conservatory, where I'd taken a sledgehammer to Lisa's precious social space. I ended up in my old bedroom on the 3rd floor. The smallest room tucked away from the family quarters like an afterthought. Someone had left a single envelope on the windowsill. Inside was a check from the district attorney's office, restitution from the criminal case, $3.2 million plus interest and penalties, more money than I'd ever imagined having as a child. I folded the check and put it in my purse, then pulled out my phone. "Curtis, it's me. I want to put the restitution money into the foundation, all of it." "Harmony, that's a lot of money. You sure?" "I'm sure. I didn't do this for the money anyway." "What did you do it for?" I looked out the window at the garden where I'd once watched Remington play. where I'd pressed my face against the glass and dreamed of belonging somewhere. To prove I was worth something, I said. Turns out I didn't need their approval for that. I hung up and walked downstairs, past the spot where the Christmas tree used to stand, past the dining room where I'd sat alone, past the front door where I'd left 15 years ago with nothing but a suitcase and $43. This time I was leaving with something much more valuable. I was leaving with the truth. And sometimes that's the only victory that matters.